What's going on, everyone? My name is Jason and welcome back to Backtrack Cinema. In this video today, we'll be doing reviews of the original King Kong from 1933 and Godzilla from 1954. Two iconic movies with two iconic characters that have ingrained themselves into the pop culture. So get comfy, get a drink, pop some popcorn, and let's talk some King Kong and Godzilla. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Backtrack Cinema. My name is Jason and this is Caleb, and we are here to do reviews of the original King Kong from 1933 and Godzilla from 1954, and this is the March Madness Monster-Thon. All month we will be talking, giving you guys reviews of Godzilla and King Kong movies. I'm really excited about this. I'm a rookie Godzilla person. I grew up on King Kong, though. But my friend here, Caleb, I guess I gotta use this hand. He's the Godzilla man. So, Caleb, how the hell are you?
Well, I am doing fantastic. I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to get into this huge collab. Being a Godzilla fan and introducing the franchise to those who are relatively new to it, it's always exciting, especially when it's regarding Godzilla. And I love King Kong too. Don't get me wrong. Especially as the years go on, and of course, eventually Godzilla and King Kong did clash in 1962, but that will be for a later episode. But it's exciting to get into these movies. I've always had a soft spot for giant monsters messing things up and fighting each other.
Oh yeah, and I think it's timeless in that sense. People are always going to want a nice creature feature.
Right.
And the funny thing was, it was Gorgo that I watched from the 60s, like the Godzilla ripoff, I'm assuming. That was the one I could remember it. Whenever I was sick, I'd come home. My mom had this sweater I'd put on. I'd go down in the basement and I'd always watch Gorgo. So yeah, these were actually, both these movies were first time watches for me. Believe it or not. I've been a King Kong guy, but it was more of the 70s ones, and the one with Linda Hamilton, King Kong Lives. So it was really exciting. Backtrack Cinema, we go back. And I love visiting movies from a different era, like a completely different era, and seeing the wacky, weird, the way they talk's differently, and you got to have context. That's what I always say, because this generation could run all over King Kong from some of the way Wray is talked to and stuff like that. But you got to remember what year you're talking. You're talking 1933. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, definitely hit that subscribe button. Go check out Caleb's channel too. And this is a collab. He's not just a guest, guys. This is like a mutual collab. We'll be doing watch parties on his channel, and the reviews will be on here. So this is going to be a hell of a month. And then we're going to segue my channel anyway into April with Ape Roll, doing Planet of the Apes. So kind of not exactly the same, but I'm just saying kind of a similar motif with King Kong. So definitely stick around for that. But let's just get right into it. We're going to start with my boy King Kong here from 1933, directed by Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, released in 1933, starring Fay Wray as Ann Darrow, Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham, and Bruce Cabot as Jack Driscoll. So, Caleb, what are your overall thoughts on this movie?
It's a timeless classic for me, in the sense that the idea of Beauty and Beast, the idea of going on an adventure to a mysterious land, something about the unknown world has always fascinated people, even before film became a thing. Just the concept of going to an uncharted place and discovering new things. I mean, we've seen many different franchises go through that direction. One most famous being Indiana Jones, right? Exploring these ancient tombs, exploring these, uncharted places. King Kong really captures the sort of fantastical action adventure that I think that everybody has a little bit of them, like in them, right? Where there's something fascinating about going somewhere far away, seeing new things, sort of intaking all the experiences, and King Kong captures that. Something I'll say about Skull Island is that it really helps that the film is in black and white because it has this sort of foggy but
Mm.
mystical look to it that it really just captivates the imagination. I
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. I think it was a very I'm watching this going, this must have terrified, and I'm talking terrified, an audience from 1933 when I'm watching this. Because I have this I just seem to be able to go back there and say, what was around at the time. Frankenstein shocked people. That was only a couple years earlier. Now we got an ape climbing the Empire State Building who's what, 60 feet tall or something like that.
Yeah.
Knocking planes out. Like this must have been a spectacle. And the story's great. You know how this filmmaker, he films things in the jungle and everything. He says, I'm going to go to Skull Island, this mysterious island, and he needs Ann Darrow. He sees her, and he's captivated by her. Says she'd be perfect for my movie. She's broke, she's hungry, so of course she's going to say yes. But yeah, this may be. I haven't watched enough movies from that time, but could this be like the first big adventure movie?
It's
Like, could it be?
possible. um I think that for the most part you weren't seeing a lot of movies about giant monsters. Like that concept was relatively new. You do have a film that actually predates Godzilla. It's called The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which actually was kind of like Godzilla. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
similarities, but as far as monster movies are concerned, that sort of big spectacle, I think this was um, relatively new. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, I don't remember a lot of films from that time period. I'm just mainly familiar with the Universal monsters.
Mm.
So King Kong being what it was presented as, especially with the stop motion, very much ahead of its time in certain cases. I mean, I was watching documentaries about the film, and just all the challenges that the filmmakers had in crafting Kong and having all of the actors superimposed in the background or in the forefront with the monster action and the jungle setting. It's
Yeah,
very
it pioneered stop motion. There was rear projection. When they
mhm,
shoot the Stegosaurus and they're walking by it, it looks like they're not really like that was a projection screen or something. That's what it looked like.
right.
Um, Hell, we were doing stop motion with Terminator 1984. That's how long
Hmm.
stop motion was around. I mean, my son came in to my bedroom. He saw me watching King Kong, and he goes, "That looks like Rudolph from the '60s," because it's the same technology with
Right.
the abominable snowman. You know what I mean? It's the same
Yeah.
technology and everything. It pioneered, like, no one saw stop motion, I believe, before. And I read today that the director wasn't intending on using stop motion at first. He
Yeah. I
wanted
mean,
he wanted to take a gorilla and have it fight two Komodo dragons over a set piece.
wow.
And they were like, "No, that's like animals would have got killed. That's the thing. If they looking, and then the film would have been tainted. So
Yeah.
they said that it's not safe. So they went with stop motion. And
Well,
I'm thinking, "Okay, what was going through people's minds then of how to get this to sell the illusion.
yeah.
I was like, wow. But the stop motion, obviously we look back at it, we go, man, this looks fake, right? But like I said, try to put yourself in that time, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Well,
I
I think
mean,
that the time period really is important to consider as far as context is concerned because uh, back at that time period, we didn't have our Marvel movies, our big spectacle superhero films with all these uh, different special effects, computer generated images. Seeing King Kong, I putting yourself in the mindset of someone in 1933, you were probably shitting your pants for all intents and
yeah,
purposes.
that's they even shot they shot some scenes in the spider pit with the spiders and everything, something Peter Jackson was able to do in his film.
Yeah,
But they got cut. But he
recreating.
said people were running fainting out of the theater when they first saw it and stuff, and they ended up not using that. Like,
Yeah,
it's ahead of its time, way ahead of its time. King Kong is part of our pop culture. He's just something. Yeah, everyone knows who King Kong is, even if you haven't seen the movie.
right.
He's like
The
up
eighth
there with
wonder of
James
the world.
Bond and James Bond, Superman, uh, Rocky, all these popular Indiana Jones, all these
Mhm.
popular movie icons. This version of King Kong, I could see how they were trying to capture that emotion on his face at times. He's pretty viciously violent in this movie.
Yeah.
He's real. I mean, a lot of the stuff was cut for the original. I think I stand to be corrected on that, guys. So if you're a huge King Kong fan, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But the theatrical, the version people saw in 1933, I don't know if he was stomping on people or throwing the lady out of the window and throwing her down on the on the ground. Like he's just like looking for Andero, going, he's just killing everything.
Yeah.
He's picking people out of his teeth and stuff like that. The setup is pretty simple. Everyone, we got they go on this long cruise and everything to get to Skull Island. But and then this relationship starts forming between Jack Driscoll and Daryl. And that's basically our setup. So these two are like, he's kind of like your hero, and she's your damsel in distress. And she's very much set up as a damsel in distress in this movie, but it's
Mhm.
1933. Maybe one of our first scream queens too, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I mean, she has a hell of a scream on her. That's one thing I really liked about her. But once we get to the adventure, once we get to the island, let's start with that iconic scene where they got her strapped up. And here comes King Kong. Every movie has done this differently. So
Yeah.
I've seen the other movies. So when I saw this one, I go, okay, how's this one being shot? And he just kind of roars and comes and kind of like looking at her, shaking his head. They're doing all that um, emotion in his face as much as they could. But this is the thing: is that she was the golden woman. She was something different that Kong's fascinated by her.
Yeah.
And I guess this tribe, to appease their god, he'll like this. You know what I mean? I guess
Right.
that's what that their thinking was. I liked his roaring and everything. I like that the way that scene and picks her up and takes off. But then we get the action set piece, the action set piece, the action set piece, the action set piece. So when I'm watching this, I'm watching Kong going through the jungle, and if you look in the background, the depth of field, like the cinematography in this is pretty interesting.
Hmm.
It's fascinating. Like I loved looking at this film while I was watching it. Seeing in the background all the vines, it almost reminds me, of Predator. When they're trying to spot the predator, and John McTiernan is focusing in on the jungle and stuff. You
Right.
see that in the background here, and I'm like, this is such a cool film to look at,
Yes.
right? Um,
It has a, like I said earlier, has this sort of mystical, fantastical look to it. The way that things glow in the background, like especially in the jungle, that sort of ambiance that you get, seeing all the trees and foliage and such. It's a very interesting set piece to look at. It's for me, it's the best part of the film. I know, like the climax where he's on top of the Empire State Building. That's fantastic too. Seeing that shot, it's just there's something very mystical about that jungle atmosphere and the way that it glowed.
yeah,
Yeah,
one of my favorite parts in the movie, and when I was watching, I was like, wow. I was like, is this the way it's shot? It's not even King Kong's not even in the scene.
yeah,
This is where they're on the swamp or the water with the raft, and that bloody brontosaurus just comes out, and the water is dripping off him. And I'm like, this has some serious atmosphere in this movie. And then it attacks them and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, what a great scene! Like I was just thinking, like we get the Stegosaurus scene, then we go to this brontosaurus scene, the twisting of the log King Kong does, and then we go to the big fight between the T Rex. Like it's a nonstop adventure movie. That brontosaurus thing, that was probably the most atmospheric part of the whole movie for me.
yeah.
Just the fog coming in, all that kind of stuff. Um, just absolutely loved it, that part. And the 1976 version, the twisting of the log was very iconic to me. Every time I watch it, I'm like, oh man, I'm a little kid again. I can remember this. So I thought, how was it handled originally? And
Right.
my God, you know what the difference is? He's shaking people off this log, throwing them down, some of them, and you're seeing them hit the ground.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
when I was like,
that was pretty
this
crazy.
this shit's serious, man. I like, of course, added they're probably just dummies
Yeah,
that, but I thought they sold that well because when they hit, they're just thud, thud, and I'm like, this is crazy. And then Kong's trying to reach that guy, and he's like hits him in the hand. He's like doing this. So I believe there is some good character to Kong for that time anyway.
yeah,
Obviously, Peter Jackson really perfected it in his movie, but um the original template is what he was going by. So
right.
seeing all these scenes, the just amazing, and the T Rex. What did you think of the T Rex scene in this one?
It was a lot more bloody than I expected. Like when he's starting to rip the T Rex's mouth
Yeah,
open, I mean, you see the blood,
it's
and
oozing out of his jaw,
yeah,
right?
and it makes me wonder if they cut that originally as well. Like how much of all that was cut because there was a lot more than I was expecting, especially for 1933, because there was a lot of censorship back in the day for certain things. I mean, and I think having that T Rex scene and just having the blood gush out, that's raw, especially for
Yeah.
1933. So,
I and I
yeah,
like all the wrestling moves, man. Like he's going for the legs, he's picking him up. He does like this suplex, and I'm like, this is like WWF, man.
before it was even a thing.
Yep. And when he's stretching he can't quite get the jaw to snap, so he kind of has it, and he pushes it to the side, and then all the blood starts oozing out, and kind of plays with the jaws after that
Yeah,
does. "Ugh." He starts screaming and doing my boy Kong is proud of himself.
King of the
Um,
Jungle.
King of the jungle, and then takes her up to that lair there and fights some more stuff. Like he's fighting a lot of shit in here, and he protects her through this whole thing. There's a huge difference between Peter Jackson's and Darrow in this one. You're saying off screen there, off the air there, that you know that she doesn't really appreciate anything Kong did for her, right? So why don't you just elaborate on that, and I'll bounce off you.
Yeah. So it's been a very long time since I've seen the original 33 film, and it wasn't even the first version of Kong I had watched. The first version I watched was the 76 film, and then I watched Peter Jackson's, and then now I come to 33's. And something that I had noticed on my rewatch is that Anne just wasn't clicking in her head that Kong was protecting her. Something that I think that the 76 film, to a certain extent, and more so with Peter Jackson's film, is that they established that when Kong or after Kong saves Anne the several times that she's in danger when they're together, she begins to realize that, okay, this creature isn't going to try and eat me because if he wanted to, he would have already done it. You know,
Yeah,
and that's something that was sort of lacking in this film, and I don't really know why. I don't know if it's because of a time thing or they weren't trying to go too in depth with it. That it was more about the spectacle, the fact that Kong was just like a big monstrous beast that didn't have too much emotion to it. You really get more of an emotional investment as the series with King
yeah,
Kong goes along. And
yeah,
I'm not talking about just the 76 film and Peter Jackson's Kong, because you do have King Kong versus Godzilla in 62, and then King Kong Escapes. And that one, they portrayed Kong with certain more human like traits. And that's sort of like a progression. King Kong was merely just a wild beast with some emotional bits in
yeah,
33.
yeah. Like the one that I believe this got cut in one of the reissues in the 50s. I can't remember. He starts peeling her clothes off like it's a banana.
Yeah.
So she's passed out. That would have been insane. You got to see top boob in 1933, because when she in 76 version, I think Jessica Lange, she's bearing it all, um he's trying to tickle her.
Yeah.
He's he's fascinated by her. He's intrigued by her, right? But I hear what you're saying. It's almost like she's not reciprocating. She's still, even though he's just going, he's
I
doing, he's
mean, in
Like,
her
you know,
defense, she's in a very terrifying situation. Like
yes.
emotions are high. You have this giant beast that's touching you. You almost got killed by a T-Rex. You know, you were strapped up by a bunch of island natives.
Yeah.
It hasn't been the most exciting day from a positive perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can understand to a certain extent why she would be like, no, get away from me. I want out of this situation. At the same time, it really should click where you have these other creatures that are attacking her, and he inadvertently, steps in, getting himself injured in some cases just to protect you. And even after all that, he doesn't even try and hurt you. And it's
Yeah.
still not clicking. Like the common sense isn't it's not there. And that's what kind of bothers me. And I don't know if it's because I watched the later incarnations of the character where it's like, okay, they're understanding, hey, the creature isn't trying to hurt me, maybe I should go easy on them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and this is especially true at the end. This is something that really bothered me because it's emotional. Like, to see Kong getting shot down like that, I didn't really feel too bad for him in this movie because they
Yeah.
didn't really play on the emotion. I think that what the later incarnations got right was that they were building a bond between Kong and Anne.
Yeah, in which
And
they looked at this movie and they said you could see that's what they were trying for. I think it's a sign of the times, honestly.
mm,
I remember George Lucas saying something once about when he did the original Star Wars, special effects with no story, then you don't really have anything.
yeah,
Like I could have all the special effects I want if there's no story. And maybe that's like they were pushing more like an entertaining adventure. This is gonna be bombastic and
right.
but maybe this in the writing department. It'd be interesting what the book was like. I think this is based on a book, and I'm kind of curious what the book was like. I'm not sure.
Mm,
I'm not sure if there was a. I thought there was a book, but
yeah,
again, let me know, guys, if you're watching. What if I'm wrong about that? I thought this was based off a book though, but I'm not sure. On repeated viewings, I I'm going to Peter Jackson's movie probably every time.
yeah,
But one thing it does, it kind of does get to the island really quick here.
yes,
Um, but yet it doesn't. It's still building the characters.
yeah,
I think anyway, at least the relationship anyway between Jack Driscoll and Ann Darrow, which is another key important thing in this story. But I get what you're saying though, where you don't really feel that much for Kong. But he's like I said, he's also set up like a vicious beast.
right.
Like when he kills all the tribe people and they're throwing spears at him, and it's just like he's going like this and he's picking them out of his fucking teeth.
Yeah, yeah,
I thought that was actually pretty comical, but he's like stomping on these people and then squishing, like he's pressing on them and stuff. And I
yeah,
was like, yeah, this what must have been a hell of a movie in 1933. I'm not surprised it's Peter Jackson's favorite film of all time. That's one
yeah.
of that was his passion project. In fact, he wanted to do that before Lord of the Rings. But once he
Hmm.
got Lord of the Rings all done, he says, I want to go back and do remake King Kong.
Yeah.
He just loves that movie. I heard him say once. It's one of his, and you know what? I'm shocked this movie didn't win the Oscars that year.
Yeah, I'd say it's sort of a mandatory viewing. If you're a King Kong fan and you haven't seen the original, you should see it. And if you
Yeah,
haven't seen it, watch it. Just remember that this is a movie made in 1933, so don't go trying to cancel it for doing things that makes you feel weird or
yeah,
uncomfortable. Just put yourself in the mindset 1933 King Kong action adventure spectacle, a little light on character depth, in the sense that at least between like a relationship, like they do develop Anne and Jack's relationship a bit. With that said, it is pretty mild. The thing I paid attention to the most was Carl Denham,
yeah,
focusing on him being this sort of greedy businessman that's just interested in, getting the money, making a good picture, or, when he gets Kong off the island where it's all about, it's Kong, the eighth wonder of the world, and we're
yeah,
going to make millions, So And it's funny
It's
because there is a sequel to this movie. It's called Son of Kong, which was
yeah.
made by the same production team, and it has the same Armstrong that plays as Carl Denham again, where they go back to Skull Island. I haven't seen that movie though. I
Yeah,
haven't
either have
seen
I.
it.
I haven't seen that. But yeah, and it's tragedy really. I mean, they take this large ape off of his home, off his island and everything like that, to this place he's completely disorientated, doesn't know where he is, and Ann Darrow's really the only. It's almost like a doll, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like
Like
a
she's like that comfort thing for
comfort.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I it's tragedy really. It's really tragic story because he just falls for this little blonde woman.
the
You know what I
Golden
mean?
Girl.
The golden girl, and then he does anything for her, including getting shot down off the Empire State Building, and then it's tragic. Beauty killed the beast.
Yeah,
It was love, it was beauty, or thing for blondes. Can't blame him. Can't blame him for that. But Faye Ray she's gone down in Hollywood history, man, for this movie.
yeah,
I don't know if she was a huge actress or she was just known for this, but um, she had a hell of a set of pipes on her because I thought the screaming really was effective
yeah.
whenever she was scared and stuff like that. But I do letter grading around here, Caleb. So for me, I think this movie's a B plus. I would give it a B plus myself.
Yeah, I agree. It is a
Yeah,
B plus. I found it to be very entertaining. It isn't boring.
yeah,
This is something like I know that a lot of people don't like watching older films for whatever reason because maybe lack of color or they think the acting isn't good. But this movie is an action spectacle. This is King Kong 33 is what a lot of the Marvel movies are for us today in the sense where it's a big spectacle with all these really bombastic set pieces and action sequences. That's what this is, or what it was for people in
yeah,
1933.
yeah.
That's how I
You
look at
didn't you didn't get stuff like that every day back then.
it. Yeah, a lot of
Hell,
it
yeah,
was noir type detective stories or westerns. That's what
yeah,
you had
yeah,
got for a lot of in that.
yeah. Like the it probably created a whole genre of adventure, and you might have had Robin Hood back then, and you might have
Mhm.
had old Zorro pictures. I'm not sure. I'm really
Yeah,
not sure. I'll get there one day though, guys. When I start reviewing, like I'd love to review a lot more movies from that time for sure one day.
yeah.
But like we'll get there. All right, on to Godzilla from 1954. First time watch for me. I know you're a huge fan, Caleb. So why don't you take the reins here
Right there.
about Godzilla and yeah, and what your thoughts on this film?
Well, Godzilla for me, I grew up with this franchise. There were three big things that I grew up on: Star Wars, Predator, and Godzilla. Those three big things were a huge influence on my life. So much so that I recall in my middle school years and talking to some friends from that time period, they're like, "Yeah, you were the guy that always talked about Godzilla. You wouldn't shut up about it." I'm like, "Yeah, that probably sounds like me." Needless to say, Godzilla is something I hold very dear to me. So much so, I have this little mini figure of the 1954 version of Godzilla. I carry it around with me everywhere I go. I've had it since 2005. It's been with me for so long. But Godzilla 1954, or in the Japanese tongue, Gojira, right? This film is legendary for many reasons. It has stood the test of time. It's something that gets talked about quite a bit. It was made in a time where Japan was recovering from, post World War II, and it was spawned as a sort of protest for the use of nuclear weapons because Japan had suffered two bombings, and you could even say a third to a certain extent, with the numerous hydrogen bomb testings that were going on in the South Pacific after World War II, which actually spawned this movie. Just a little backstory: there was an incident where a sailing ship in Japan called the Lucky Dragon was hit or it was affected by one of the hydrogen bomb testings that were going on. The passengers of the vessel, they suffered. A lot of them died. It was a huge controversy back in the day, and because Japan was still sort of under the watchful eye of the U.S. government, the protests were, well, they were squashed essentially. There wasn't a lot that could be said that would speak against it. So they made this film as a sort of response to that, and it was unlike King Kong, which was an action spectacle that you would go to have fun. This movie was very dreary and depressing. It's a great film. You want to talk about atmosphere, you know, after Godzilla's rampage in the film, the first rampage on Odo Island, it sort of gets in your mind that this creature is a very deadly force of destruction. And what's brilliant about this is that they do not show Godzilla right away. In the opening credits, you hear his footsteps and you hear his roar. And
Yep.
then when you get to Odo Island, you hear that again, you hear the footsteps. But your first introduction to Godzilla is where a ship it's out at sea and it gets hit with Godzilla's radioactive breath. And once again, that's sort of like a nod to the Lucky Dragon, where
Yep.
the ship gets destroyed and the passengers die as a result of radiation.
Yep.
And as the film goes on, there's another incident with another ship where Godzilla's in this certain area of the bay and the ships keep getting destroyed. And then the whole movie is trying to find out the mystery of what's going on. Of course, when you get to Odo Island, that's where things get really interesting, because something that I didn't realize initially early on when watching this film is that there's a lot of backstory to Godzilla on this island with the natives, where they say they in ancient times they would do human sacrifices to appease Godzilla so that the he wouldn't eat all the fish, so that they could have a good harvest, to
Yeah.
survive. And it kind of reminded me of King Kong, where they would present a girl to so that the king or their god would be
Yep.
appeased.
There's quite a few similarities with these two.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you said though, this one's dark, depressing, it's atmospheric. The
Hmm.
other one's more like action, spectacle, and adventure, and it got a kind of cool human story.
Right.
But this has a lot of human condition to it, which I was not expecting.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that's why I stayed away from Godzilla so long. I always thought he comes out of the water, destroys everything, and goes back home, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean,
I
don't
was,
get me
I was like,
wrong.
then I was
He.
like, shit. There's a love triangle happening through this movie.
Mhm.
There's debate between scientists. With was it Sarazawa? Is
Yeah,
that am I saying that
Sarazawa.
right?
Hmm.
Um, Making the oxygen killer, but saying sacrificing himself because he doesn't want anybody getting a hold of this thing because what it can do.
You think about how bodies work with oxygen. I mean, you're
Yeah,
depriving the body of oxygen. You're killing whatever it
yeah.
is.
So basically, Godzilla suffocates to death essentially,
Yeah.
in and I thought that was like a really cool ending, but I also thought it was like, man, and he's there's this debate, should Godzilla be studied or do we have to kill him? Like there's the old man scientist,
Dr.
Dr.
Yamane.
Yamani.
Hmm.
So there's all that going on. And then there's also the courtroom stuff saying, no, people deserve to know the truth. No, we can't tell them. It's too dangerous. There's this is fucking layered, man.
Yes.
This and
Yes.
so when I remember one of the complaints about Godzilla from 2014 people made, not enough Godzilla. I go, there's not much Godzilla in the original, folks. What I'm getting at is the build up of Godzilla.
Yeah.
I'm watching this going, Godzilla coming? I can see radiation, coming out of the water, and then he pops his head over the hill. You see his footprints.
Yeah.
I love that though, but I'm a slow burn guy. I like when they build something up so that when you do see it, it's a huge spectacle.
Yes.
Just like the Jaws effect, right? It's
That's
the
what I was
Jaws effect.
thinking.
Now, by accident, Spielberg did it all he wanted to show that shark for the whole movie. Jaws, Jurassic Park, all these films are impactful because there's not as much creature time as you think there is.
Yeah.
It's very little screen time, and Godzilla does the same thing.
It's
You
how
know,
it's
there's
used, how it's executed, really, because
yeah,
what happened with the Godzilla franchise is it started to go into that more cheesy sci-fi monster territory, which has its own merits. I'm not discounting that era of Godzilla films because the character itself is so versatile with how it can be presented. Um, a lot of people prefer the more serious tone. Other people like the more silly nature. I like both.
yeah.
Both have their own individual places, which is why I can watch the legendary MonsterVerse Godzilla films and I can still enjoy it. They have their problems, and I think that with the release of Godzilla minus one, it goes back to this film, the original film, that you need to have a good human story to ground the audience. You can have as many giant monster fight scenes as you want. With that said, if you don't have a human element to make us care, then you're going to take people out of the movie. They're going to look at it as a dumb, cheesy monster movie, which the Godzilla franchise has been ridiculed for that very thing for so many years. And a lot of people didn't even really watch it. In fact, they watched the 98 Godzilla and said, oh, well, that's pretty much what the franchise is. Or they'll look at the what is referred to as the Showa era of Godzilla films, which was from 54 to 75. Um, Before Godzilla took a rest, but more on that later. But that era of films, you had a more cheesy Godzilla, which eventually they sort of reeled it back to where it was a little bit more serious. It was a balance, but this film in particular, straight up serious. There wasn't any real humor to go around. That's like, oh, that's funny or cheesy Godzilla.
No, this
It's
was not a funny movie, man.
yeah.
And what Godzilla represents, this fascinated me because after watching this, I'm like, I tend to think about things a lot, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking about this. Man, this is Mother Nature taking its revenge on man. That's what Godzilla is represented as. He's
Godzilla
with
was a warning to humanity.
exactly like, and they're dropping all these freaking H bombs everywhere, killing each other off, and then Godzilla is this representation of, you know what, I'm striking back. Mother Nature striking back. You wanna do that? Well, I'm gonna give you something 100 times more destructive. And I was like, there's a lot more to this movie than I thought there was going to be.
I think that a lot of people that made fun of Godzilla, they never watched this film. They never watched Godzilla. They knew about the name, they knew about the creature, and they knew about the sillier movies that were filtering its way through across the decades. Because what you have to remember is that, at least for here in America, we did not have access to these films for the most part. Up until 2000, really, there was only one Godzilla movie, if I recall correctly. It was Godzilla 2000, and that was the only movie at the time from Toho that was actually released theatrically here. Now, you did have some of the older Godzilla movies that made its way onto cable TV, um, and one or two of them on home video, but it wasn't until the 2000s where these films made their way to the states. But with that all being said, um, people it upset me even as a kid where people would just make fun of Godzilla without even realizing what they're making fun of. They never watched this original film. They don't know how serious it is. They don't know what the character meant, what it represented. And that's why I'm saying, I mean, Godzilla minus one did a very good job of this. Like, if you want to get somebody into Godzilla, I would say start with minus one and then start to go back because Godzilla minus one was a nice callback to this film that had a compelling human story with the human drama, and it had the monster action that you would want. You know,
Yeah, well, at the time of this recording, I haven't seen minus one yet, and I'm very excited to see it. I've heard nothing but great things about it, so I'm excited about that. But this movie really surprised me, and I just watched it. Well, I kind of browsed through it again before doing this, and I was enjoying it even more the second time.
Mhm.
Like let's talk the special effects, groundbreaking for its time. A guy in a suit doing model make, but that was the state of the art effects at the time. That's how things were done, and I loved it. I thought Godzilla stomping around, breathing fire, um, just destroying everything. I thought it all worked with all the models, and made the black and white helps. The gritty
Yes.
look of everything
Yeah.
really hides a lot of everything. But I really enjoyed it. I mean, this was death and destruction, and he like wipes out Tokyo,
Yeah.
wipes the fucking out. He wipes everything out, goes back into the water. I watched the American version too, and this is where
Yeah.
I did not like it. I felt like it was just a documentary on the Japanese version. And in the American version, Godzilla is 400 feet tall. The
Yeah.
Japanese one, he's 165 feet tall. So I'm like, did they get lingo mixed up and didn't transfer properly? Because I got confused. I was like,
Yeah. Believe me, you're not the only one because that's how it was back for me in the day. Watching the 56 re edit. And it's funny because in 1955, they came out with a sequel. It was called Godzilla Raids Again. So you had another Toho produced Godzilla movie that came out before America decided to re edit the original. And when you watch both versions, like I'd say that both are watchable. Like it might be a little bit controversial, maybe not, but I would say that you need to watch the original. Like
yeah,
watch the 56 re-edit after.
yeah,
After. You
you can
need to watch
try.
yeah, I mean, you need to watch the original to get the message, to get the understanding of well, maybe you shouldn't be making fun of Godzilla so much because it was a
It
very
also
serious thing.
it also feels like the American version. This feels like not only a documentary, but you're hacking everything apart. Like it just it was hacking all the best stuff apart. Like it's almost like it was almost like going to a concert and the band only plays half songs.
Yeah.
You know
I
what I'm
mean,
saying? Like
the the 56 re-edit cut out a lot of crucial scenes. Like some people might consider some of the courtroom scenes in the science, where they're talking about the science of Godzilla, they might find it kind of boring, but this whole movie, everything is interconnected. It's kind of weird to say that. It's like, well, no, duh. But in this case, this is something that when you compare the original version to the 56, you can notice it because at the end of the day, Raymond Burr is literally just narrating the stuff. Like, oh, we're the dumbass American audience can't grasp the concept of these people trying to figure out Godzilla and the ethics on what to do with it. It's like, oh, it's too complex for the American mind, I guess. But no, it's somewhat shameful, and I'm saying this as someone who doesn't mind the 56 film, but going back to it now, if you ever want to introduce Godzilla to somebody, you want to start with the original 54 film, don't show them the 56 version until after.
no. I'm so glad I never watched that first.
Yeah.
Because I would have been like, I don't know, maybe it would have made sense to me, but watch watching the Japanese one first, I was like, um, very impressive. And the roar on Godzilla, it's so metallic, metal sounding. It's so unique.
You want to
I
know?
fell in love with it.
You want
And the score, I thought was just like that main theme that goes around. Dun, 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 dun. It was so good. I was like, this has one hell of a score.
Yeah, the composer's name was Akira Ifukube, and he did every Godzilla soundtrack up until 95, which
Oh,
saw the end of I mean, for a bit, for a few years, Toho didn't do any more Godzilla films until the 98 film came along and what? So they came out with Godzilla 2000, but no, Akira Ifukube's soundtracks, they're all legendary. The Godzilla theme has evolved over the years. I'd say that a great culmination of the theme came during the Heisei era, which started from 1984 to 95. Um, the Godzilla theme it's iconic. it's
Mhm.
as iconic as the character himself. The roar. Here's a little trivia fun fact for you, but the Godzilla roar was actually a glove that was being rubbed against strings, like guitar strings, I think.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
That's fascinating.
It's crazy.
Yeah, same with like King Kong. It was recordings of tigers and lions.
Hmm.
That's how they're making him, roar. And another fun fact about the original King Kong, it was the first score that was composed as original piece. First
Hmm.
original score. I guess before that they would just take bits and pieces of other things and mash it all together. That was
Hmm.
that King Kong has one of the first original scores. So a little
Wow.
fun fact there. Um 30s. It was the 30s. And but yeah, Godzilla from 1954. I was really impressed, man, of how dark the movie was, which I like. I like darker themed stuff.
Hmm.
There's some little bit of light. They break the tension up pretty good
Yeah.
at times. And I love that sacrifice at the end this guy makes.
Yeah,
You
Dr.
know?
Serizawa is a character that, he's the mad scientist. Like I look at him as a sort of Robert Oppenheimer type character where he's made this terrible weapon and now he's faced with a decision, you know, release this power into the world to deal with this current power that we're dealing with and end up creating more problems, or don't use it. Of course he ends up using it, but the compromise is that he burns all of his notes and he sacrifices himself so that that information can't be used. And it adds to the tragedy of the character of Godzilla, because Godzilla really is a tragic character. It was something that was reborn or awakened due to the misuse of power by mankind, and he decimates the city as a sort of punishment type thing. And then
Yeah,
humanity has to make.
like when he's suffocating, I actually felt bad for him. I didn't look at Godzilla as this monstrous creature who was out to destroy everything on purpose.
Yeah,
He's a product of misuse of power, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Um and Mother Nature, like I said,
Hmm.
taking her revenge. And he's this prehistoric beast from the Jurassic period, I believe. Like he's some kind of who's been affected by radiation. So he can
Right,
breathe fire and he's got these added powers. Like, they're testing the radiation everywhere. Don't step there. Don't step there.
right.
And that
On the
kind of stuff.
island. Yeah,
And I really do enjoy the when they're dancing on the boat and they see Godzilla. And that was a really cool scene.
yeah.
The light and shadow they were using.
Very much a very dreary and ominous atmosphere where it's funny because Kong and Godzilla, it's like a sort of duality where
Yeah.
one of them is more lighthearted and mystical and the other is dreary and ominous,
Mm.
very different films. But I can watch these films back to back and then jump straight into King Kong versus Godzilla, which it I'll say this, that the Godzilla franchise, it loses the message just a bit in regards for how serious the consequences are. It does delve into that more cheesy monster action. Some of the films do still hold certain messages, and some of the films in the franchise are more well known than others because it has messages that they are putting out there that getting people to think about it, whether it be the nuclear weapons argument or the issues with the environment. That's what you get in some of these later films. It's really good stuff. It's to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, you've taken your first steps into a much larger world.
Yeah. Well, I have seen some of the later ones, but not these early ones. So I'm excited. I'm excited. For me, Godzilla is a B plus as well. I'd give it a B plus myself.
For me, it's an A plus,
Excellent,
hands
excellent. Well, there,
down.
there
I
you go.
mean, especially in comparison to some of the other films that go on later in the series, this film's message, the way it's delivered, like looking at it as a sort of protest to the use of nuclear weapons, it's a pretty good way to do it. Rather than ham fisting you with a bunch of upsetting and depressing facts, it presents to you characters that you grow to care about as the film goes along, and then it gives you uh, the embodiment of the dangers of using these weapons in the form of a giant monster that can destroy cities. And really, what this film shows, I mean, how useless the military was in stopping him. Like they had to go to extreme measures just to defeat him. That was
Yeah.
one of it's a very powerful, like when Godzilla comes ashore in Tokyo and he completely decimates the city, you see the military do everything they can to stop him, and it just nothing is working. No
Yeah.
electricity, no fire, firearms, explosions, none of that is working. And the aftermath where it has the choir of girls, singing as a sort of morning prayer, um, it's very emotional, and
Yeah.
this is where the plot for Dr. Serizawa, it becomes more impactful and tragic, that seeing the military not be able to stop this creature. And they kept the theme going where the military or humanity couldn't stop Godzilla. It always took an extreme measure like the oxygen destroyer or another monster just to defeat Godzilla. I like that they kept that theme, because if they made the mistake of what the 98 film did, which is having this big ominous creature be defeated by the military, it lessens the impact, because it's like, oh, that's it. That's all it took to defeat him.
Yeah.
Having that progress going where humanity is at its lowest point, or in this case, Japan is at its lowest point, and where they had what they
Yeah.
had to
It
do.
it becomes a morality tale. It becomes a, where you're dealing with moral issues, and it also that's what really uh that's when I really started liking it. I was like, wow, there's a lot of issues they're talking about here. And maybe the first disaster movie. I looked at this as a disaster movie. I
Yeah,
looked at it as a, when with the buddy there who would do The Day After Tomorrow, and or all these disaster movies. I think he
yeah,
did the remake the Godzilla, actually,
he did.
if I
Yeah,
stand to be correct. Yeah. Um
Roland Emmerich,
yeah. No, I
who
mean,
who
not my
said he didn't even like the original Godzilla films. He didn't even really want to do it.
well, there you go. That's a
Uh,
prerogative, but that's what it reminded me of. Like, could this be one of the first disaster movies we've
it could
seen?
be.
You know what I mean? Because that's what I looked at it as. It's people running for their lives, disaster. They can't do nothing about it. They're running, and it takes this scientist to come up with this destructive weapon that he doesn't want to use, and then he has to sacrifice himself. And I thought the ending was so good. I thought it was so good, and seeing his freaking bones at the end, this his skin, that was pretty. Like when they foreshadow it with the, I don't know, not exactly foreshadowing, but when Amiko sees something in the tank, we don't know yet. I was like, what the fuck did he do? Like, I was watching it going, I thought he mutated one of the fish or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
I thought they were gonna get something to fight Godzilla. That's what I
Yeah,
thought was gonna happen. And so I was very surprised at the ending,
yeah,
and how they destroyed it through science and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it was great. It was great, and I'm excited to get into some more King Kong Godzilla.
yes, for sure. You have to go into these movies with a certain mindset, especially with Godzilla, because King Kong, it doesn't set itself up as a movie or movie series that is trying to send a message. It really is just trying to be entertaining. And obviously, as we've discussed here, the original 33 film was just that. It was a very entertaining, action filled adventure film. And Godzilla was this more tragic story, man versus nature, and the consequences of abusing power and what that power can lead to. The later films, they do dive into this a little bit more in certain cases, but it really wasn't until I want to say the early 70s Godzilla films where it started to get back more into that serious tone. Because in between that time, between 54 to the early 70s, Godzilla had started to become more appealing to children. And that's where it sort of lost its more serious touch. With that said, it can still be fun to watch. It's still enjoyable seeing Godzilla do his thing, destroying cities, fighting giant monsters. It's still all very entertaining. It's just that the later films did get more serious, and they have their cheesy moments as well. I mean, this franchise is layered with its cheesy moments, but I think it all works. For me personally, it works. I can take the serious Godzilla. I can take the more cheesy Godzilla. I can take the Godzilla films that balance them both. And you definitely see that in the Heisei era, which is from 84 to 95, where it's a balance of some of the more cheesy, crazy elements, but it also has that serious tone where Godzilla, he's not a good guy. He is this force of nature, and humanity's either trying to make weapons to defeat him, or you have other monsters that are fighting him. It gets pretty interesting.
Hit us up in the comments. Tell us what you guys think of King Kong and Godzilla, these original movies, and we got a lot more content coming down the road. With these movies, we'll be doing like 2 movies in one session, in one video, guys. So that's how we're gonna do them. So it's gonna be a lot of fun going through this stuff. So, um, subscribe, like, share, check out Caleb's channel too,
Yeah.
because he
Um,
talks about all this kind of stuff.
yeah. And in collaboration with J Man here, we're going to be doing. So back in 2021, or late 2020, early 2021, before we were known as the Dark Ether Files, we were known as the C Files podcast, and we had did a segment called the March of the Monsters, which was celebrating Kong and Godzilla. Funny enough, we were doing reviews, discussions with these films, much like we're doing here. And now we're bringing that back and for this collaboration, but it'll be watch alongs this time. It's going to be a lot of first time watches, especially for some of my co hosts who haven't seen all these movies. So it's going to be really exciting to be able to talk about them here and then watch them on our channel. I'm very excited to get into this. Very excited.
Yeah. Great first episode. Really enjoyed it, Caleb. So yeah, guys, we're gonna head out here now. We hope you enjoyed our first episode of the King Kong and Godzilla. A lot more to come to keep you entertained with the March Monster-Thon for sure. So yeah, everyone, have a good night. I'll talk to you later. See you later, and I'll see you in the movies, man. Cheers.